1 in 3 organizations doesn't provide anti-harassment training to their employees. On a small scale, that statistic might not sound as significant as it actually is, though. However, when you realize that there are more than 32.5 million businesses in the US, it suddenly seems more problematic. In other words, 10.73 million businesses in the United States don't train their employees on anti-harassment. That's a big problem, especially when you consider how common harassment occurs in the workplace. Out of all the different types, though, sexual harassment is by far the most common type. It unfortunately accounts for 50% of all complaints. There are 2 main points that I'm trying to make with all of this that I'm giving you right now. First, you need to make sure that you provide anti-harassment training to your employees. Second, the material you provide must include and cover sexual harassment as a topic. You see, sexual harassment is so common that it's arguably what fueled the #MeToo social movement. Since then, many state legislatures now require that businesses provide sexual harassment training for their employees. At the time of this video, 22 states have some form of sexual harassment training requirement. The 32, DC include, that don't require it, recommend it. In other words, if you don't provide this type of training for your employees, you should strongly consider it. The only question then becomes, how can you provide this training? Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Tactics, and today I'm going to give you 4 key things you need to know before implementing sexual harassment training. Before we get started though, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the button below. While you're down there, hit that alert bell icon next to it as well, so when we post new helpful content, you get notified. First thing you need to know is your state's requirements on sexual harassment training. Now, I alluded to this in the introduction of this video, but the reality is that almost half of all states have a sexual harassment training requirement. That makes things easy, right? Well, actually not really. You see, the reality is that each of those states has a different requirement in place for this type of training. I'll give you a few examples so that you can see what I mean. Sexual harassment training has been a requirement within the state of California since 2004. The Golden State requires that organizations with 5 employees or more need to take this type of training for 1 hour every 2 years. Kentucky does have a requirement in place as well, but it only applies to state officials. Washington, D.C. on the other hand has a requirement in place specifically for tipped workers. The point I'm trying to make with all of this is that different states have different requirements for sexual harassment. Thus, it's important that the training you provide to your employees is compliant with the local government that you're headquartered within. That last statement holds true from content administration and ongoing management perspectives concerning this training. If what you provide to your team doesn't align with where you're located, you're putting your organization at risk for a fine. Second, you need to make sure the training you provide is engaging. After you've selected or added material for sexual harassment training that's following what your state requires, it's time to send it to your team. Wait, not so fast. You see, one of the often overlooked aspects of training is whether or not it's engaging. Many organizations view compliance training as a requirement that's fulfilled by checking a box. As a result, they seek a one-size-fits-all training module that they can send en masse to their team. Although that sounds easy, there's a big problem with this approach, and it requires a classroom comparison. Harvard actually published a study that compared traditional classrooms to those that incorporate active learning, and what they found was astonishing. Now, when you hear the word college lecture, what comes to mind? If you're like me, you think of those giant slanted rooms with swivel desks and cushioned seats, and at the front of the room is the professor who's feverishly scratching at the chalkboard while droning on and on about the lesson in a monotoned voice. That's not very exciting, right? What do you picture the majority of students are doing in the back of the room in this scenario? Sleeping. Now, if you juxtapose this concept with training material that's simply a PowerPoint presentation given to a team of professionals, are there really any differences? There probably isn't anyone sleeping in the back of the meeting room, at least hopefully not, but some of them are still disengaged. So what's the solution? Well, Harvard found that students who participate in classrooms that use relevant and engaging examples learn more than those that use traditional methods. So, make sure the sexual harassment training you assign to your employees is engaging. Third, it needs to be relevant training. After hearing that, you're probably wondering what I mean by relevant examples. Well, the unfortunate reality that I've alluded to throughout this video so far is that sexual harassment is a common occurrence throughout the United States. Since it happens so often though, it provides a database of real-world examples to tie into your module. Remember how at the beginning of this video I mentioned the Me Too movement? Tying in real-world examples related to the concept that you're trying to train your employees on works. All that you have to do is a quick Google search, read a few articles, and include the summaries of what you find in your training. The final key thing your training needs to include is the signs of sexual harassment in the workplace. 7 in 10 women who experience sexual harassment while at work don't report the incident. You could say that that statistic is the result of organizations not mandating proper internal training. Although that's probably true, it's only part of the equation. The reason why many sexual harassment instances go unreported may also be because of a content issue. 98% of organizations had policies in place for reporting this form of provocation in 2016. Now, most policies include definitions and remediation steps if an incident occurs. However, I'm not proposing that that's the gap. Instead, maybe it's a matter of employees not knowing the signs of sexual harassment and how to report it. Being the victim of an inappropriate act in a professional atmosphere takes a large psychological toll. It's not fair to place all the responsibility for reporting on the victim. Thus, you need to spread out that responsibility to your entire team by teaching them the signs of sexual harassment. A recent report found that 90% of employees feel more aware of how to report a sexual harassment incident after receiving training. We live in the unfortunate reality where sexual harassment in the workplace happens often. The statistics I provided throughout this video are proof of that. Although some might think it's easier to turn a blind eye, that's just not acceptable. The only way to combat the grim statistics I've provided throughout this video is by implementing a comprehensive sexual harassment training program. It needs to provide your team with the tools necessary to spot, stop, and report any misconduct while staying in compliance with what's required by your organization's state. If you'd like to learn more about sexual harassment training, reach out to eTactics. And you already made this far into the video, so you might as well like it, share it, and comment below. Well, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to our YouTube channel.